originating from Hamas. The BBC's Imogen Fox.
There have been repeated warnings about rising levels of malnutrition across the Gaza Strip, and repeated pleas to Israel to allow more supplies in have gone unheard. The UN Human Rights Chief warned again today that using starvation as a weapon of war was a war crime. The UN Secretary General described the famine as a man-made disaster, a moral indictment, and a failure of humanity itself. But in Israel, the government and many Israeli citizens continue to deny that famine exists.
Recapping on your top stories, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has reiterated his call for Africa to be granted permanent representation on the United Nations Security Council. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Brazilian striker Lucas Ribeiro Costa has taken his club to FIFA in a quest to have his contract terminated, while Live Golf is offering $50 million and the prize purse in the final tournament of the season. Details of these and other stories coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Here's what we've got on your agenda this afternoon on Africa in Business. We'll look at the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD, which has concluded in Japan. Kenya's managed to secure $169 million in financing. We'll find out what that money is to be used for. We're going to be joined by Peter Wakaba, a business news editor in Nairobi, and he's also an economic commentator. We'll also take a look at the construction industry in South Africa. Joining us a bit later on, that's actually about 20 minutes to 5 o'clock. We'll be joined by Aubrey Chalata, the president of the National African Federation for the Building Industry, otherwise known as NAFBI. This is a story that we've actually carried in some level or the other, where we spoke about Murray and Roberts, one of the huge construction companies in South Africa, one of the big five. They're struggling to keep their heads above the water and currently face liquidation. What then is the state of the construction industry in South Africa? We'll analyze these and other business-related stories on the African continent this afternoon. It's 9 minutes after 4 p.m.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
South Africa's Finance Minister, Minister Enoch Godongwana, has sounded the alarm on rising government debt, warning that the country is fast running out of room to borrow. South Africa's public debt is expected to soar to 77.4% of GDP this financial year. He added that the budget process is entering uncharted territory, with Parliament and government still learning how to balance trade-offs in a fragile economy. Godongwana, speaking at a workshop on Friday, held at the public's input in the budgeting process. Dimakatso Leshuru filed this report.
South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has warned that the country's ballooning debt is eating into money meant for schools and hospitals. Speaking at a workshop designed to get the public's input into making trade-offs when setting the country's budget, he pointed to the numbers that tell a stark story. Treasury expects to collect about $107 billion in revenue, but government spending will exceed $124 billion. That leaves a large gap funded entirely by borrowing. Debt service costs are already one of the fastest growing items in the budget, with the country borrowing an average of $56 million per day. The minister warned that if South Africa keeps missing its fiscal targets, creditors may lose confidence and begin dictating terms.
Can't borrow unlimited. Can borrow up to the extent of being able to service that debt. If you can't service it, you've got a problem. So it starts borrowing and cutting. Even in cutting expenditure, there's limited in how far you can cut. But there is a possibility of some fat in government, I must be honest. Hey, if you can look at the duplications that happen at the institutions that we set up, we've got about 200 state public entities employing about 160,000 people are paid above the Public Service Act. that stuff is not going to escape the top.
The trade-offs are painful, he acknowledged. Since 2018, the state has spent more than $28 billion propping up failing state-owned enterprises, money that could have gone to schools and hospitals and the police. In fact, Treasury said between 2018 and 2023, about $13 billion was effectively taken away from education and health to cover bailouts. Kotongwana says this was a mistake that drained resources from essential services.
520 billion rand bailing out state-owned enterprises. Where was that money coming from? 243 from education and health, almost 53 billion rand from defense, 69 billion rand from the police. There's nothing to cut in sports, arts and culture. When we want to cut budget, we cut from those people who've got a bigger budget, and they become the victims. So we're in the process of correcting that budget, and in an environment where it's not an easy task to increase taxes. So I'm talking a long way to say we will welcome some ideas.
Despite these pressures, social spending remains a priority. 61% of the budget goes towards social wage, including education, healthcare, and social grants. But the minister says the real question is whether that money is enough to meet South Africa's vast needs. Beyond the finances is the politics of the budget. The minister says this year's budget cycle has exposed both opportunities and weaknesses in South Africa's democracy. For the first time, no political party holds a majority in parliament. That, he explained, meant MPs are expected to play a bigger role in shaping the budget, but they are not yet fully equipped for it.
To be honest, even the members of parliament were not ready for the task because it's immaterial what the minister says. The minister can bring in 20% of whatever tax. The law says once the minister tables the budget, then the members of parliament must be able to examine that budget and question it and amend it, but not to reject it. That's what an interesting thing. The law says amend it. Accept it or amend it, but not to reject it. Now, our colleagues in Parliament have been faced with this responsibility of having to amend this budget. By the end, at rejecting it instead of amending, which is not what the law says they must do. Even the Parliamentary Budget Office is not up to the task because it itself used to be only criticize the budget here and there. But in order for it to be up to the task, it must help Parliament to amend. So, which means it is going to require a different skill set.
To strengthen fiscal credibility, he has proposed workshops with parliamentary committees and opposition parties so that everyone involved better understands the trade-offs in budgeting. Kotongwana will deliver the medium-term budget policy statement on November 12th, setting out spending and revenue plans for the next 3 years. That's when South Africans will see how government plans to juggle debt, trade-offs, and the urgent need to rebuild confidence in the economy. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimagazo Leshoro in Johannesburg.
The KwaZulu-Natal Convention Bureau, in collaboration with Milvest Advisory and the city of Mhlathuze, brings you the 2025 Tourism Investment Forum, Africa. By positioning these regions for sustainable growth, TIFA helps drive their economic ambitions while providing access to critical capital, networks, and strategic insights on investments in the trade services sector, such as tourism. Join us for the TIFA 2025 from August 27 to 29 at Tembela Venue, Richards Bay, KZN, South Africa. Be part of the movement transforming tourism and infrastructure in Africa. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 15 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time as the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, otherwise known as TICAD 9, concludes in Yokohama, Japan. Kenya has managed to secure itself $169 million in financing, and this is to support the East African country's vehicle assembly and energy sectors. The Samurai financing facility is set to strengthen the local vehicle assembly and parts manufacturing industry while also addressing electricity transmission and distribution losses. For more on this, we joined this afternoon by Peter Wakaba, a business news editor in Nairobi. Peter is also an economic commentator. Welcome to Africa in Business, Peter. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
So could you start off perhaps by briefing us on the Kenya-Japan bilateral relations and also, I guess, what makes Japan a strategic partner for Kenya's vehicle and energy sectors?
Well, to start off, the partnership between Kenya and Japan diplomatically goes back decades, with as many as about 120 Japanese companies already operating in Kenya and in the East Africa region, using Kenya as a stepping stone into the hinterland, producing everything from medicine to vehicles to factory equipment, agricultural equipment. The list goes on and on. The trade regime, though, has been highly skewed in terms of Japan, because Kenya imports much more, doing only about less than a third of what Japan exports to Kenya, going in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. And while Japan exports mostly manufacturing finished materials, Kenya exports mostly agricultural products and is looking to improve this going forward.
And what are the prospects and the projections on how Kenya's automotive sector is expected to directly benefit from this loan? And if you could talk to us as well about the size of the sector in Kenya.
If you think about it, the large Japanese conglomerates making vehicles in Kenya, we have market leader Isuzu East Africa, market leader by far for especially light commercial vehicles. Then Toyota comes second. Toyota, though, plays into several different spaces, being also in the agricultural space. Toyota Tsusho having put up a fertilizer plant in the western part of Kenya to service the entire region. Isuzu in particular celebrating 50 years of operations in the country this year, having produced about 100,000 units since then, just under 100,000. It's a small but growing, very fast growing sector compared to global standards, and of course compared to the South African market, but one that's opening up quite fast. And the focus is now starting to go towards cleaner, more energy efficient vehicles, especially those that are powered not by petrol or diesel, but electric.
So if we look at the sum total of this loan, it's $169 million US dollars. Do you know which specific projects are going to be financed through this loan? Have those already been identified?
So one of the critical things that I know that they are looking towards is to ensure that going forward, the Toyota Motor Corporation is expected to put in about 5,000 e-mobility vehicles into the country over the next 5 years. And this is also expected to drive 30 to 40% local content in assembly and eventually manufacturing, so a trend towards full local production of the future. So this loan goes towards expansion of facilities, putting up the necessary materials and supporting infrastructure for e-mobility. Of course, the move towards cleaner energy, like you had mentioned earlier, and of course the health aspect, because there has also been a letter of intent and a concept note that has been signed to enable one of the larger pharmaceutical companies in Japan to start making bacterial pneumonia medicine here in Kenya, a company called Shionogi and Company Limited. One of the pillars, of course, of the TICAD 9 conference was society, apart from, of course, economy and the political peace and stability. So quite a large focus towards not just economic, but also social development in terms of education and health.
It does sound to me, Peter, that the vehicle and energy sector is but a gateway to what could be a much larger relationship, commercial relationship between Japan and Kenya. You've just mentioned now investment in the pharmaceuticals industry. Are there other sectors that you believe would be next in line for investment from Japan?
Yes, definitely. So if you think about it, Japan has been struggling to play catch up to China in the region. China being the largest trading partner for the whole of Africa, not just Kenya. And then, of course, remembering the trend towards the Pan-African market, the AFCFTA. And the push has then been to try and catch up with the volume of trade that China does, which is about 250 billion US dollars annually. Japan may be doing just about a tenth of this. And the initiatives then towards to capture and open up new markets through initiatives such as the Free and Open Indo-Pacific Initiative, which will push companies across the Indian Ocean seaboard that have direct access to Japan to be the stepping stones for the rest of the region. Now, it's important to remember that altogether, Japan has announced about 30 billion more worth of investments across the continent. And while China goes the, so to say, the debt and infrastructure development route, Japan has been focusing largely on aid and now is moving more towards trade. And the Prime Minister, Mr. Ishiba, saying that they will push so that the next conferences will provide direct initiatives that open up markets, especially in the face of a tightening of the global trading space based on what has been happening in regards to the US and tariffs. That's opening up new markets for African countries in the Far East, in Japan itself, and of course, working to bring specific investors for specific sectors. In this case, Kenya itself was able to do direct engagements with about 120 direct investors who are then going to focus on different specific areas, of course, around the motor vehicle, like you mentioned, that industry, manufacturing, and technology, and of course, to come and invest in the various special economic zones that have been built with a huge focus on internet, technology, and communications.
Peter, when I look at the last numbers that I have, looking at Kenya's debt profile, the latest numbers that I have are towards the end of 2024, which is September 2024. And back then, Kenya's government debt stood at 67.6% of nominal GDP. And we know that far surpasses the IMF's recommended threshold of 50%. Now, given Kenya's current debt levels, what are the risks that come with taking on a debt of this magnitude for Kenya?
Well, if you think about it, one of the initiatives that Kenya has been trying to do to get out of this situation is to essentially reschedule its debt, which essentially means that if you have a large loan coming due as of December 2025, putting pressure on you to be able to pay this in dollars, if you can find someone to then buy that off, give you a longer tenure so that you pay over a longer period at maybe high interest rates, but essentially giving you breathing space, then that's what the government does, and it has already done that through a Eurobond. So this new Samurai bond goes in that direction, essentially giving the government an ability to source dollars as and when it wants from that market, because having already done one bond, then that lowers the risk profile and enables local investors in those bonds who will buy those bonds in Japan to already have had a taste of the pie, and thus build the appetite. So essentially, it's a situation that will continue to unwind in a good way as we go forward and it's managed properly. The key thing was to ensure that there were ways to be able to find the foreign exchange that was needed to pay off these loans, and that can be done over longer tenures, lengthening the loan periods so that then the country gets more fiscal space to be able to meet its obligations.
Peter Wakaba, thank you very much for that update.
Asante sana.
Asante sana. Peter Wakaba there, business news editor in Nairobi and economic commentator on Kenya's current debt levels, but also perhaps more importantly, the loan that they've gotten from the Samurai Financing Company of Japan, $169 million that are going to go largely towards the vehicle sector and energy. But also, as you could hear, so many other sectors likely to benefit from this, including the pharmaceutical sector. It's exactly 25 minutes after 4 p.m.
AUSISA, the Association of Water and Sanitation Institution of South Africa, is a platform uniting Africa's water professionals. This November, Africa leads the conversation on water and sanitation. Join global and African leaders at the AUSISA Africa and Global South Dialogue 2025 from the 9th till the 12th of November at the Emperor's Palace, Johannesburg. From policy innovation, this is where action meets collaboration for a water-secure future. Register today at ausisa-watersan-dialogue.org or follow at AUSISA on social media. AUSISA, working together for sustainable water and sanitation security in Africa. The KwaZulu-Natal Convention Bureau, in collaboration with Milvest Advisory and the city of Umhlathuze, brings you the 2025 Tourism Investment Forum, Africa. By positioning these regions for sustainable growth, TIFA helps drive their economic ambitions while providing access to critical capital, networks, and strategic insights on investments in the trade services sector, such as tourism. Join us for the TIFA 2025 from August 27 to 29 at Tembela Venue, Richards Bay, KZN, South Africa. Be part of the movement transforming tourism and infrastructure in Africa. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 27 minutes after 4 p.m. as we continue our focus on TICAD 9. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says the recent tariff actions by the United States have highlighted the need to diversify export markets. Ramaphosa is taking part in the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development Summit in Yokohama. Japan is one of the major investors in the South African economy, with 270 Japanese companies and creating 200,000 local jobs. It's also the fourth largest economy in the world. Kaelihle Kumalo reports.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has made it clear that Africa is not seeking aid. It wants partners that understand value co-creation, sustainable development, and mutual industrialization.
South Africa seeks to deepen inter-Africa trade while becoming a continental industrial platform from which Japanese and other global firms can expand and export into our continent. We're actively working with the AFCFTA Secretariat to finalize value chain protocols in automotive, agro-processing, pharmaceuticals, and textiles.
Africa considers Japan as a key pillar on its journey for reindustrialization.
As part of our industrial policy, we're expanding trade with key countries and improving market access for South African agricultural and industrial products. We are incentivizing electric vehicles and battery production and supporting green hydrogen value chains through infrastructure and skills investment. South Africa is growing its health manufacturing capacity with a focus on vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. Our country is also expanding digital infrastructure to bridge gaps in access and enhance service delivery.
South Africa also says it's on a path to revolutionize energy sector and pursuits of low carbon and climate resilient development.
We're here as part of the President delegation to TICAD 9. Japan is a very important and strategic partner in the South African energy complex. A number of Japanese entities are already invested in the country. For an example, Mitsui has participated in the first round of a renewable energy independent power producer procurement program. They are invested in the DISA and Avon, which is two of our privately owned PICAs that helps us to ensure that they were able to meet the demand.
A number of key players are parts of the proceedings in Yokohama. Japan wants to strengthen its ties with Africa on innovations that could help the continent's healthcare system.
I'm thrilled to be back in Japan for the week that TICAD is being hosted, and we talked about how the Prime Minister is going, and we'll meet with a great number of African countries, and we talked about the work we've done together and the key global health activities with Gavi, with Global Fund, and the kind of innovation taking place in Japan that'll create new products that'll help us improve African health.
Pretoria says it's counting on Tokyo to jointly advocate for rules-based global systems that support fair trade, sustainable investment, and value chain integration. Kaelihle Kumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
That takes us to exactly 4:30 Central African time. Let's head over now to the markets, where Matapelo Mahape is standing by with your latest market indicators this Friday.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami, and good afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 rand 70 cents in South Africa. In Botswana, it's trading at 13.28. In Namibia, it is trading at 17 Namibian dollars 70 cents, while the Zambian kwacha is trading at 23 kwacha 21. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling at 38. In Ethiopia, it is trading at 141 birr 41. In Uganda, it is trading at 3,000 shilling 543. In Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 492. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 535. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 48 Egyptian pound 51. In Tunisia, it is trading at 2 dinar 88. In Algeria, it is trading at 129 dinar 17. In Morocco, the dollar is trading at 8 dirham 98. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,834 to the US dollar. A look at your commodities: gold is trading at $3,332 and platinum at $1,340 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $67.59 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matabula Mahape.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And for the latest business of sport news, here is Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the sports desk. Now, Thomas Frank, the head coach of Tottenham Hotspur, has said he doesn't want any players at Tottenham Hotspur who don't want to be at the club and wear their fantastic badge after his side appeared to miss out on the signing of Crystal Palace Ebarache Eze. So Tottenham Hotspur were quite confident by completing a deal for the England international this after reaching an agreement with Palace as well as personal terms with Eze, but Arsenal then swapped in to agree a deal with up to $91 million. This is what Frank had to say about that signing and, of course, missing out on the player.
I don't want any players that don't want to come to the club. They don't want to come to the club and wear this fantastic badge, then we don't want them here. I think that's very clear. And I'm also pretty sure that the fans will feel the same. If they don't want to put the fantastic shirt over their head, play for the badge, play for the club, really enjoy it.
So the transfer window is closing in 9 days from now. Frank had this to say about the fact that the team is working hard on signing more players ahead of that closing day.
I said it many times, I'll say it again. The club is working very hard to see if we can strengthen the squad, and we only want to strengthen the squad with players that we think is good enough, we can improve the squad. So that's done from the beginning, and that we will continue doing to the end of the window.
On to this now. Manchester City defender Ruben Diaz has signed a 2-year contract extension with the club. The 28-year-old previous deal had been set to expire in 2027, but his new deal will now take him to the club until 2029 with an option for a further 12 months. Now, the Portugal international joined City from Benfica for a fee of $85 million back in 2020, then was also named Premier League Player of the Year at the end of his first season. The defender also helped City to 4 league titles, the Champions League, the EFL Cup, as well as the FA Cup during his 5 years at the Etihad Stadium. Back home now, Brazilian striker Lucas Ribeiro Costa has taken his club Mamelodi Sundowns to the FIFA Football Tribunal in his quest to have his contract terminated with the South African Giants. Now, the South African footballer of the season, who has not played for Sundowns since the 2025-2026 season started, has had offers from the end of last month. In a statement released by Ribeiro, he believes that he has just cause now to terminate, his contract with Mamelodi Mamelodi Sundowns, which he says he will explain before the FIFA Football Tribunal. Now, quoted as well in the same statement, Riberia's agent Jean-Louis Dupont said Qatar Soccer Club had sent Mamelodi Sundowns a particularly generous transfer offer for Riberia, which wanted him to join the Qatari club. However, Mamelodi Sundowns attempted to drive up the price again and again in an unreasonable manner without any regard for the player's personal interest, which has now made the deal impossible. That's according to his lawyer. And finally, Live Golf will wrap up its 2025 season this week in Michigan with a team competition. It's offering an eye-popping $50 million prize purse with $14 million to the winning team. So the team event is much more different from Live's weekly competitions. This time around, though, Live's 12-4 team are the only act in town. Now, the Legion 15's team, captained by John Rom of Spain, won the regular season title and enters as the top seed in this year's competition. Rom, by the way, also won Live's individual season title just last week, pocketing around $3.5 million in the process. Well, that concludes your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. Have a great sporting weekend. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. The KwaZulu-Natal Convention Bureau, in collaboration with Milvest Advisory and the city of Umhlathuze, bring you the 2025 Tourism Investment Forum Africa. As a global platform for local action, the Tourism Investment Africa aims to promote the secondary and tertiary cities and regions as attractive investment and tourism hubs. Be part of the movement transforming tourism in Africa. Join us for the TIFA 2025 from August 27 to 29 at Tembela Venue, Richards Bay, KZN, South Africa. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
It is exactly 4:38 Central African Time. Still coming up for you this afternoon on Africa in Business, a look at the South African construction industry, and this in the backdrop of one of the big five construction companies, Murray and Roberts, in the country, possibly facing liquidation. We'll be speaking to the president of NAFB, which is the National African Federation for the Building Industry. Are you involved in the construction sector in South Africa? And what are your comments regarding this possible liquidation? What is it likely to impact, and how is it likely to impact the industry in South Africa and workers? We do know that construction is traditionally one of the big drivers in the economy. You'll find us on all the various social media platforms, on X, Instagram and YouTube. We are at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook, we are at Channel Africa.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Now, as South Africa gears up to host the Africa Critical Minerals Summit in Johannesburg next week, the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, GIWUSA, is calling for a continent-wide mineral strategy to prevent another, quote-unquote, scramble for Africa. The union is also pushing for the formalization of illegal mining, locally known in South Africa as Zama-Zamas. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa has more on this story.
A spotlight on South Africa's critical minerals. The country's Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, has emphasized the need for a united approach to critical minerals with the focus on boosting local beneficiation.
We should not be bullied for what we own. We must have a view, and our view must be respected, that we mine these critical minerals. People need them. They must talk to us. We must not give them critical minerals in their own terms, and our views are ignored. Now, I'm talking for the industry now. I'm talking for the industry. You get 30% tariff imposed on you Please send those critical minerals somewhere else where there are no tariffs, where you get optimal value.
Mametlo Sebei, president of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, GIHUSA, has urged African nations to adopt a unified mineral strategy to prevent another scramble for Africa.
The upcoming Africa Critical Minerals Summit, dominated by multinational corporations and parasitic elite behind these corporations, including mine owners, directors, investors, as well as state policymakers and experts, is absolutely illegitimate from our class and political standpoint. These are people who exploit the labor of our members in the mining industry and their lands at the expense of their families and communities. So they can't speak for us. Proceeding from this composition of the gathering, we can boldly assert that the summit will be nothing more than a sophisticated and a modern rerun of the colonial scramble for Africa. It is neo-colonial summit designed to lock our continent and its people into a role of a mere supplier of raw, unprocessed minerals for the energy transitions and technological ambitions of the advanced capitalists and imperialists.
GIHUSA is calling for the formalization of illegal mining, commonly known as zamazamas, and has outlined how they believe this can be achieved.
The crisis of illegal mining is a direct creation of the mainstream mining industry's failures. Giant corporations have abandoned mines, retrenched thousands of workers, and left behind vast mineral wealth, creating conditions for disparate people, including many migrant workers from across the region impoverished by capitalism and imperialism and abandoned by the same corporations in these mining-affected areas to risk their lives for a meager living. GIHUSA's call for formalization of artisanal mining is not simple endorsement, but a necessary urgent intervention to save lives, protect communities, and bring this economy under democratic working class control.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Simos in Johannesburg.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. We are on OpenView's Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
It is exactly 4:43 Central African time as we turn our focus now to the construction industry in South Africa. There are some ongoing concerns over the industry in South Africa, which has been in decline for some time now, with one of the big construction companies struggling to keep its head above water sometimes. Some commentators have attributed this slump largely to a lack of public investment in infrastructure. This is the story we carried for you earlier during the course of this week as we focused on Murray and Roberts, one of the big five companies in South Africa in the construction sector, who are facing potential liquidation. This is after a creditor initiated legal proceedings in the Gauteng division of the High Court, and they're seeking a final or provisional winding up order against the company. What was quite interesting about this is the fact that Murray and Roberts did not come up to dispute this. For more, we joined on the line by Aubrey Chalata, the president of the National African Federation for the Building Industry, which is NAFBI. Mr. Chalata, good to have you with us once again on African Business. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Thami.
So what is your reaction to the news of Murray and Roberts going into liquidation, given its really long history and the impact that it's had in South Africa's construction industry?
Well, I must say from the construction industry point of view, all of us are saddened by the reality that has befallen Murray and Roberts. As you are aware, this is one of the giant companies in South Africa. They are responsible for building mega icons in our country, namely the Carlton Center, Gautrain, Sun City, Medupi Power Station, the Cape Town Stadium, and many more. So indeed, this is a sad day for the construction industry in South Africa.
And how would you describe the state of the construction industry in the country when a company of that magnitude with such a history that is really, in its term of existence, provided so many jobs, but also, made great profits for themselves as a company. If a company of that magnitude can be going through a situation like this, what does that say about the rest of the industry?
Thami, you are aware that not long ago, Basil Reed, one of the mega companies in South Africa, also faced challenges. We have had challenges, for instance, with the decline in such companies as Greenacre LTA. And some of the mega South African companies that have been in the construction industry spectrum for quite some time have followed the same demise as Murray & Roberts. But that said, there is an emergence of a number of very dynamic companies in our industry, particularly medium-sized companies and small companies. And those are taking up the space. And I would say that we've also been able to retain some of the critical skills from those major companies. I think the industry is showing some degree of metamorphosis, and there's some transformation taking place, and there's some paradigm shift taking place in our sector. But regards challenges, the sector continues indeed, as you say, to face challenges. One of the key challenges we continue to face is, as you say, government spending on infrastructure. The second challenge that we face, as you are aware, is the challenge of skills itself. And I think as a country, we need to invest more on skills. And lastly, we also face the challenge of community uprisings, which are labeled as the construction mafia, demonstrating on work stoppages on mega projects. And these, coupled with load shedding and other challenges in the economy, have put the industry immense strain.
You've highlighted a lot of key critical issues, Mr. Chalata, but I'm just wondering if the likes of Basil Reed, if the likes of Murray and Roberts, under these conditions, have failed and are failing and struggling to survive, what more of these smaller and medium-sized companies, which you say are emerging, that are an indicator of an industry that is in metamorphosis?
Yeah, Thami, look, the industry has turned the corner. And if you study it carefully, confidence has been boosted in the industry, and that has contributed to the projected 3% increase moving towards 2027. Secondly, the infrastructure investment, particularly coming from the investment groups like the IDC and development banks like the African Development Bank and the BRICS Bank and other banks, that's also fueling positive sentiment into our industry. And there's also a number of initiatives indicating sector-specific growth, and there's a growing civil tender activity. And as you would see in the likes of Sanral, in the likes of renewable energy space, as well as in infrastructure, in water maintenance and fixing of that infrastructure, there is a number of civil tender activity that is growing. And I think the medium-sized companies are able to pick up on that. But also the financial structure, or the financing structure that is pertinent to larger companies is not the same as the one that finds itself in medium-sized companies. I think for that reason, medium-sized companies are able to survive and able to go through this wave better than the major companies. And I think the change we are seeing is that companies are breaking down into medium-type size companies, and those are able to withstand the challenges that are posed by our industry.
Thank you very much, Aubrey Chalata. A really fresh take on this particular situation. We thank you for your input this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Have a great one. Thanks, Aubrey. That's Aubrey Chalata there. He's the president of the National African Federation for the Building Industry, saying, look, this is an industry that's in the midst of transformation. No longer are we likely to be seeing the big Basil Reeds and Murray and Roberts and the big companies, but instead it's the smaller and medium companies that seem to be thriving and emerging. And that may be just the future of how construction companies are constituted in South Africa. Takes us to exactly 10 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time. In just a moment, a look at your leading business stories on the continent. This is something we do every single Friday with Victor Khomuswana.
The KwaZulu-Natal Convention Bureau, in collaboration with Milvest Advisory and the city of Umhlathuze, bring you the 2025 Tourism Investment Forum Africa. As a global platform for local action, the Tourism Investment Africa aims to promote the secondary and tertiary cities and regions as attractive investment and tourism hubs. Be part of the movement transforming tourism in Africa. Join us for the TIFA 2025 from August 27 to 29 at Tembela Venue, Richards Bay, KZN, South Africa.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It's that time again on a Friday when we look at the leading business stories on the African continent with none other than Victor Khomoswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He's also the Communications and Marketing Director at the Limpopo University. A very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us once again, Victor.
Good to talk to you again this beautiful Friday, Thami.
It certainly is, and I'm sure you've also experienced the fact that it's really starting to warm up. Spring is literally around the corner.
Freezing already. 28 degrees in Johannesburg? Come on.
Look, we are appreciating the heat. I don't know if as much as Botswana is appreciating this $12 billion investment deal that they've signed with Qatar's Almonsu Holdings. Tell us more about the intricacies of this. We know Botswana has really been under stress recently with the decline of the value of diamonds and, synthetic diamonds now flooding various markets. This seems to be a glimmer of hope for them.
Yes, the GDP went down by 3%, and you've put it very well, because the lab-made diamonds are taking over the organic diamonds, or the ones that are mined. I know De Beers is trying to say, no, the value replacement value is better for mined diamonds than lab diamonds, but I don't think consumers are going to be paying more. That's why the market is dropping. But the $12 billion investment is supposed to go into many sectors: infrastructure, energy, mining, diamond refining, as well as agriculture and tourism, but also cybersecurity and defense. You cannot ignore those two, because we are in the digital economy, and the $12 billion coming from a diversified group based in Qatar, which has got many other investments in Africa already, is a scoop for the Botswana Development Corporation.
Looking at Zimbabwe, some rather positive news coming out there from the African Development Bank. They've projected that the country is on course to achieve a 6% economic growth rate this year. What are they attributing this projection to?
Yeah, and let me just say, if they achieve that, they would have outperformed their sub-Saharan Africa peers. That is more than 40, 46, 47 countries. So that is quite a scoop. They attribute this to something that many people never thought they would hear about Zimbabwe: stability and recovery in key economic sectors. And these are agriculture, new mining projects, manufacturing and construction. Now, when you hear this about Zimbabwe getting new mining projects and manufacturing recovering and construction being on the rebound, agriculture as well, you understand why there was the medium-term fiscal and monetary statement that was released on 7th of this month. If you remember, since they said all accounts with a balance of less than $100 will have no tax, and then point of sale transactions that are equivalent of $5 in Zimbabwean ZiG dollars will not be subjected to any tax. They are trying to digitalize. The beauty of digitalizing, Thami, is that you have control of what's happening in the country, and you can report much better, which is why you hear them talking about fiscal and monetary policy stability, because now everybody is able to see on a computer screen from anywhere in the world what is happening. And the principal economist at the IMF in Zimbabwe is the one, Kelvin Banda, is the one who's saying the sound and fiscal monetary policy. Like I'm saying, many people will never have thought we would be talking about that because of the problems that Zimbabwe has been through. But that's the beauty of digitalization and globalization, that you become forced to take on a much better stance and be more accountable and transparent. And that's why you are seeing this kind of trajectory that will see Zimbabwe outperforming its sub-Saharan Africa peers.
I tell you what, Victor, if that really does become a reality, a huge feather in the cap for Zimbabwe, and one that would really be worthy of applause, because after decades of really being the stepchild economically, this would really be a good turn for them. And talking about the value of digitization, this may just be, good news for Mr. Digital Innovation, who've received an official approval from the Central Bank of Egypt to transform into the country's first fully digital bank.
Yeah, and I mean, Mr. Digital Bank Innovation is wholly owned or majority owned by Bank Mesro, which is a 1920 bank owned by the state of Egypt. It will be launching in 2026, but the advantage here is with the market share they have, because I think they have more than 500 locations, the shareholding bank. That will mean they will be able to reach. They're talking about financial inclusion. And if you think about it, digital inclusion means everybody can transact. The cost of transaction will go down, and that will be just good for everybody. Because Egypt, again, I repeat, is this frontier. It connects Europe, it connects Middle East, it connects Sub-Saharan Africa. So it is a very strategic economy because it connects those three regions. And because of the intra-Africa trade that's happening, but also the surge in investments from the Middle East, Egypt is a strategic economy. So for them to get the Central Bank of Egypt approval means one bank could end up being a major player. It's not from a small corporation that it is coming out of this. It's from a very big banking group that owns this MID.
And if we could, Victor, in literally 30 seconds as we wrap up this afternoon, talk to us about the importance of Ethiopia receiving this $4 billion in foreign direct investment during the fiscal year to July 2025. What is this from, and what is the significance of this?
The significance of it is that if you are having to restructure a $1 billion bond and you have defaulted on it, it's like you have a huge debt, Thami. You can't repay it, but at least your trading is increasing. So they are getting a lot of investment from overseas, and they are saying if we can just get the restructuring done, it means the investors are believing that although Ethiopia is indebted like most other African countries are, at least there's growth of the economy and the influx of investment will be able to offset that. And all the investors want to know is that you will not be going into a country that will become bankrupt. It might be over-indebted, but it is at least the profit and loss of the country is working.
Investor confidence there rearing its head in Ethiopia. Victor Khumswana, always a pleasure. Have yourself a great weekend. Thank you so much.
You too, Thami.
Thank you. That's Victor Khumswana, author of Africa is Open for Business. And Africa bounces back as we wrap up this week's edition of Africa in Business. And we say bonjour, bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour à toi, Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Alors, tout à l'heure, sur Vue d'Afrique, on parlera de la justice française qui prononce un non-lieu concernant Agathe Abiyarimana, mais aussi du procès de Joseph Kabila en RDC, mais également du Nigeria qui expulse 51 étrangers, dont 50 Chinois. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci, Thami.
Merci beaucoup. That's Joël and Joël coming up in Vue d'Afrique. That's how we come to the end of Africa in Business today. Thank you for having joined us. Looking forward to looking at what business next week is going to be looking like on the African continent. Just a reminder, if you've got any stories that you believe would be of interest to our listeners, both on the African continent and in the diaspora, do send us your stories to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the team, have yourself a splendid evening further. Goodbye.